What is up, my friend? Welcome to episode number 13 of the Anthony John Amix podcast. And today is another Sunday sermon edition. And I'm going to be diving deep on the concept of how to deal with conflict. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Anthony John Amix podcast, the one and only podcast designed to help you become unstoppable in life and business. My name is Anthony John Amix. My friends call me AJ. And my goal with this podcast is to help you remember who you truly are, so you can maintain your center in the chaos, embody your potential, and unlock freedom in your life and business. That being said, let's get into today's show.
All right, well, welcome back. I'm really looking forward to unpacking today's topic because it's something that has really, honestly, personally changed my life. I mean, conflict is something that has haunted me for really, honestly, the better part of my life so far. And the good news, though, is about for the past 3 years, I've really dove headfirst into the pit of conflict, and I've extracted some really brilliant lessons, and I'm sharing those with you today. And also, I'm going to tell you, learning how to resolve conflict is extremely important if you're 100% committed to living your greatest life and fully embodying your potential. Because conflict, it's going to happen. No matter what, conflict is going to happen. And if you don't learn how to deal with it, you will become a shell of yourself, and I'll explain more on this in a second. But before I dive into the meat of this episode, if you like what I've been throwing at you on this podcast, I want you to make sure to connect with me on Facebook at facebook.com/AJAmix, because every single day I publish a new piece of content to help you have more freedom, purpose, and success in your life and in your business. And I even share behind the scenes of what's going on in my life, and every now and then share some pretty cute pictures of my daughter, if I must say so. And something else, you're just going to have to see and read for yourself. So I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/AJAmix. So just connect with me on there. Just, simply shoot me a friend request, whatever, and we can connect. So let's dive into how to deal with conflict. Now, what I'm about to say may ruffle some feathers, but, I believe it needs to be said, especially if you're living in the good old United States of American culture right now. Here to go. All of this PC political correctness is bullshit, and it's robbing you and every single one of the people around you of their opportunities for growth. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. I want you to imagine for a second that you're a UFC fighter. And I want you to imagine that you've been training your entire life to fight and to win a championship belt in the UFC. And here you are on a 5-fight win streak, knocking people out left and right. And Dana White has called you up and told you that you have the next title fight in 12 weeks. And you're excited, right? I mean, this is your dream to fight in the UFC and to become the champion. So you have to get prepared for the fight. So you call up some of the people to help you train, and you bring in people to help you spar, right? So come fight night, you're ready to go. Now, using the power of your imagination, I want you to imagine that it's sparring day with one of the top-notch fighters that you've brought in to help you get ready. And I want you to imagine yourself in the octagon, looking across at your sparring partner. And your coach is there, and he hits the clock to begin the round, and he says, fight. So you walk across the octagon to square off with your sparring partner, and he's throwing some shots at you, right? And after about the third or fourth punch they throw at you, you realize, your sparring partner's only throwing their shots at about 60% of their capacity. You realize that they're not giving you everything they have in the sparring match. Let me ask you a question. If this was the case, how would you feel? Well, if you're like most high achievers who are serious about winning their game, you'd probably feel robbed. Because here you are on the brink of the largest fight of your career, and you've brought them in to spar with you, and they're only hitting you with 60% of their potential. They're not giving you their all, and as a result, it's robbing you of the opportunity to grow into the greatest version of yourself. If you're open, I'll have you consider that anytime you're pulling punches in conflict with another human, you are robbing them and yourself of growth. And that, my friend, is an injustice. So what does this have to do with conflict and resolving it? Well, it's everything, because I see way too many people pulling punches when they're in conflict with people. I mean, they're pulling punches in their marriage, with their employees, with their kids. They're pulling punches with their friends and their family members. Too many powerful people have a bullshit belief system that those around them cannot handle their full power, so they play small. When, if you're open, I'll have you consider that the truth of the reality may be is that you're afraid of your own power. Now, I know this was the case for me for many years. Like when conflict arose, I would shut down, I would bite my tongue, I would stonewall, silently resenting the person I was in conflict with. And rather than leaning into the conflict, I would attempt to appease people, believing if they thought I was nice and if they liked me, maybe the conflict would go away. And essentially, I was the guy who was pulling punches. Now, on the other side of this, I see people running full force into the conflict, believing that they have to fight and bully their way through conflict, and they, my friend, become the asshole, and I have been that plenty of times in my life as well. It's like when it comes to dealing with conflict, many people seem to believe that there's only two paths. Path A is to be the wimp, where you get run over and you stonewall and you appease, right? And path B is to be the warrior, where you go to war with every single people who's challenging the thing that you want or doesn't meet your expectation of what things should be. And I've learned time and time again, the extremes are not where power is found. Power always seems to be found in the middle ground between the two extremes. So how do we deal with conflict? Well, I told you this is Sunday sermon, so I'm going to dive into a little bit of scripture here. In Matthew 18, verse 15 through 17, Jesus says, "If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of the 2 or 3 witnesses. And if they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they still refuse to listen to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector." So let's unpack this for a second, shall we? First, I don't believe sinning means that we're going to hell. Like if you do believe that and that empowers you, totally cool. Keep on rocking along with that belief system. For me personally, that doesn't really serve me. But what does empower me is looking at sin as missing the target to create love, harmony, and unity with the people that I choose to have in my circle. So in verse 15, when Jesus says, if your brother or sister, meaning any human in your circle, right? This could be a family member, a friend, an employee, a contractor, a client, whatever. If any human in your circle sins, go to them. Like, how hard is this in reality? Like, really, go to them. Pretty simple, right? But too many people are caught up in their bullshit gossip, or they're airing out their shit on social media, right? When if you want to deal with conflict, then man up and go to the person that you have conflict with. Run into the fire. Run into the conflict. You're going to survive. And I'm not talking about bullying. I'm going to give you a framework to help you show up in conflict, in power, without blame or shame. Because if you constantly are blaming and shaming people, of course there's going to be conflict, and of course it's not going to be resolved. And I remember there's this time, like I received this Facebook private message I think it's been about 18 months ago, from somebody that I considered a newly acquired friend. And this is like out of the blue. They attacked me via private message for being out of integrity and accusing me of stealing another friend of ours' content. Now, I knew with 100% certainty that I wasn't out of integrity. And I certainly didn't steal anyone's content. And there was a big part of me that was fucking pissed off, because that's the last thing I want to be, is out of integrity. And there was a part of me that wanted to go to war over that. Now, I knew the person that he accused me of stealing content from. Like, I knew them personally. They're in my cell phone. I just pick them up and call them phone. So I immediately picked up the phone. I called that person, right, who this other person said was mad at me. And it turns out that that person wasn't mad at me at all. They didn't even know that there was conflict. They didn't even know that anything was going on. And they were completely blindsided by this crazy accusation as well. Now, could I have created a train wreck for the world to see on social media about this? Yeah, I could. But why would I do that? Like, why wouldn't I just keep it simple and just go to my brother, right? I'm talking about a human, and resolve it as quickly as possible. You know, I learned a pretty good lesson from Ryan Stewman from something he said on one of the trainings he holds for the mastermind group I'm a part of. And he said something like, everyone wants to watch a train wreck, but nobody pays to watch the train wreck. Now, these are pretty wise words, because in this game of social media, everyone is competing for attention. But the thing is not all attention creates value that people will pay for. So don't make the mistake of creating the train wreck for people to watch, because it's a waste of your time and your energy. Now, Jesus continues to say, if they will not listen, then take one or two others along. Now, I take this to mean get a mediator. Pretty simple, right? And there have been times in my marriage where my wife and I were stuck on something. Like we're in conflict with one another, and I was acutely aware of that we're running in a pattern of just this chaos, and it's looping, right? And rather than continuing the pattern, like I attempted to resolve the conflict with her, right? I went to my sister, right, her, and we weren't getting anywhere, so I hired a relationship coach. And by the end of that $250 investment for an hour of his time, the conflict was resolved and deeper connection and intimacy were created. Why? Because I followed the strategy Jesus outlined. But too many people are like, oh no, it's $250. That's a waste of money. We should just solve it ourselves. If you could solve it yourself, then solve it yourself by going to the brother or sister. But if you can't solve it yourself, like drop your pride, drop your ego, go seek outside help. Get that testimony from a third party and resolve it, right? When you do so, you'll have a lot more freedom. And that was some of the best $250 I've ever spent for my mental sanity. And if I have mental sanity, then I can go out and make way more than $250. Now, this only occurs when you have absolute trust and respect in yourself, what you've talked about in previous episodes. Now, I'm not saying that you have to always bring in a mediator for resolving conflict, like with your clients or contractors, right? I mean, that would be silly. I'm talking about for the relationships that you truly value, that you have a desire to keep in your life for many, many, many years, right? That's when you go out and have that mediator. For the contractors and the clients, I would just stick to the go to them, go to the brother or sister philosophy and attempt to resolve the conflict. And if you cannot, then see you later, client, see you later, contractor. And I'll teach you how to resolve that conflict here in a few minutes. I'll give you a framework. And then Jesus continues and says, if they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. Now, for me, this means like your family or maybe your super close inner circle, right? Or your mastermind that you're a part of, like whatever your church is. So they can then help you see and give you some new perspective to help you resolve the conflict, right? And then Jesus concludes this formula in dealing with conflict by saying, if they refuse to listen, even to the church, right? The inner circle, right? Your family, etc. Treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector, which means to cut them off, right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now, I do my best to resolve conflict in this manner. Now, I see a lot of people, especially when it comes to family, they have some story, right? Some story that blood is thicker than water. And while in reality, blood is thicker than water, I'm going to have you consider that your relationship with anyone isn't. Like if the relationships are serving you and they're empowering you, fantastic. If they're not, try to resolve it. And if not, then move on. See, I choose to operate from a frame of if there is a shared mutual trust and respect, and we have an alignment in values, then I'm like, cool, let's play for as long as we can play with one another. And then the moment that those things start differing and a conflict arises, then we have the openness to have dialogue about it, and we explore finding a win-win. But I sure as hell I'm not going to grind it out with the family member just because they're blood. Like that story, man, caused me a lot of stress. And when I just dropped it and was like, hey, can we find common ground? If not, that's cool. You can have your experience. I can have my experience. And we can just move on, right? I'm telling you, like, it's super simple. So why am I telling you how Jesus tells you to deal with conflict? Because it's simple and it works. Yet most people are way too afraid to handle conflict. See, they judge conflict as bad. They believe that conflict shouldn't ever happen, right? And if they have conflict, then something's wrong or something's wrong with them. But I have a wake-up call for you. Conflict is part of life. Like the great stories, the great movies that have ever been written, they have conflict in them. Like if they didn't have conflict, it would be a boring movie. It'd be a boring story. And this is our life. I've learned that the contrast, right? It's the contrast that makes this human experience fun and fulfilling. Remember what I said about pulling punches and it robbing us of growth. Conflict is the gift, my friend. It refines us. It helps us grow into our full potential. So what are some tools that I can give you to help you metaphorically punch someone in the face with all your might? And to be clear, I am not talking about physical or emotional violence. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just metaphor. I'm talking about pure, unconditional love. Now, most people think love is hugs and kisses and harmony and unity. And I'm here to tell you that it's not. That's conditional love. Unconditional love is doing what's best for the betterment of another human. And sometimes this means calling them on their shit. Sometimes this means calling a spade. And sometimes this just means holding them accountable, regardless if they like it or not. So how can we do this without blame or shame, right? Because if there's blame or shame, I guarantee you people are going to feel attacked, they're going to feel a need to defend, and there's going to be conflict. So my favorite framework for dealing with conflict is CPR. CPR. Now, I first learned this from Jeremy Eugene Wilson. You may remember him from episode number 2. And CPR is an acronym that stands for Context, Possibility, Resolution. I'm going to say it again. Context, Possibility, Resolution. So let me explain this. So context, this means like this is the facts surrounding the happenings of the conflict, right? Just the facts, what's going on, the context of what's happening. The possibility is what is possible to move forward. It may be 1 or 2 possibilities, maybe a handful of possibilities. They're just possibilities, and resolution is exactly that. It's exploring how to work together to resolve the conflict, to find the solution, and not being attached to it has to be this way. Like you're like, hey, how could we, resolve the conflict, and being open to finding a win-win. Because if you win, they lose, it's still a lose. If they win, you lose, it's still a lose. So you have to draw a line in the sand to find win-win. Be really clear. Hey, this is a win for me. What's a win for you? How could we work together to create the win-win? Only like a win for you, a win for them is a win. Anything else is just going to be bullshit and it's going to be drama. So let me give you an example to make this practical. So if you've been listening to the previous episodes of this podcast, then my wife and I have been traveling throughout Europe with my 14-month-old daughter for about 6 months now. And for nearly 6 months, we've been living in different country every 2 to 4 weeks, staying in really incredible Airbnbs and just really living like a local. I mean, we've been to Madrid, Lisbon, Madeira Island, Barcelona, Lausanne, Switzerland. We went to all around Romania and England, right? And now we're here back in Dallas right now. Now, this was a dream of ours that we had been working towards for 3 years. And we didn't just want to save up enough money and to just travel and be some type of vagabond. That wasn't our target. We wanted to work and travel and still contribute to our long-term financial freedom funds in the process. And so that's why it took us 3 years to pull it off. And that's what we have been doing for the past 6 months. Well, by month 5, when we got to Canterbury, England, to be honest, I was tired. I was tired of moving every 2 to 4 weeks. I was tired of the stress of carrying and pushing our 4 huge-ass luggages because we had sold everything in America. So everything we pretty much owned was in these huge luggages that weighed 50 to 70 pounds. I'm carrying them up, 7 flights of stairs in Madrid, one by one and down and up and down. This car seat that weighed, I don't know, and this is not an exaggeration, probably 50 pounds. My wife bought this tank, this Hummer of a car seat. Why? She says, what's the best? It's the safest. And it's great, unless you're having to carry that motherfucker on your back all through these countries, right? Then it's a whole different story. And we had this Boogaboo stroller that, again, weighed probably every bit of 30 pounds. It's one of the best strollers on the market, and it was heavy. So here I am with 4 luggages, this huge car seat, and a stroller, and this is what we're carrying around and moving every 2 to 4 weeks. And I was tired of this. I was also tired of listening to my daughter Zyra cry on the flights, right? I was tired of not being able to do date nights with my wife because we were working in shifts. Depending on the time zone, it was I would work in the morning, she would take care of Zyra. Then we'd flip where she would work in the evening, I would take care of Zyra, and that's kind of how we'd been doing things, right? And that was wearing me out. I was also tired of my wife not being able to be present with me. And by the way, she had every right to be not present. She had so many things going on, but it wasn't a win for me. And at the end of the day, I was just tired. And the truth of the reality for me was internally within me, there was conflict. Now, to be clear, before we left our home in Dallas, Texas, right before we left to Europe, we agreed to travel for a year. That was the plan. Yet here I was 5 months into this, having an internal conflict. Now, the old me 4 years ago, I would have just bit my tongue. I would have sucked it up. I mean, because I would have been after all, these have been thoughts in my mind. We had a plan. I agreed to a whole year, so we have to stick to it. I don't want to be a failure and not stay a whole year, right? This was what all of my internal self-talk would have been 4 years ago. But if I would have done that in this instance, the thing what would happen is I would have been snappy, I would have been depressed, I would have been unhappy, and I would have been pulling punches, thus robbing my wife and myself of growth. So I spoke the truth in love. I used CPR. I said something like this. I was like, hey, babe, I know originally we agreed to travel throughout Europe for a year, right? In the past 5 months, they've been amazing. I mean, we've seen some amazing places. We've went to Sintra. We've went to just some really incredible places. We've had some great food, like that meal we had in Switzerland on Thanksgiving. That was great. And we've created some really cool memories. But right now, I got to be honest, I'm not enjoying this anymore. I'm not happy. That was the context. And notice there's no blame or shame in that. That was just simply my truth, the context of the situation. And this, my friend, is the beauty of CPR, okay? Now, most people, they attempt to blame or shame others when attempting to resolve conflict, and that's just going to perpetuate it. So don't make that mistake to speak to the context, okay? So I got the context, set the frame. Then I transitioned into the possibility. I said something like, I see two possibilities, babe. Possibility number one is we keep traveling for the rest of the year like we originally planned. Now, we're not going to be, if we do this, this means we're not going to be doing date night for the rest of the year. We're probably going to continue drifting apart from one another. And we're going to be traveling for the sake of traveling because that's what we agreed to do, right? That's possibility number one. And that sounds pretty miserable to me, but that is a possibility. And then possibility number two is we go back to Texas. We sign a lease on a luxury apartment with a view. We hire a nanny. We take a 7 to 10 day vacation once a quarter. This way we can still travel, we can be present with one another, and we can have fun again, right? And this, my friend, this was like the possibilities that I saw at the time. Possibility number one, we travel, I'm miserable. Possibility number two, I get clear on what I want. Hey, we could go do this. We could still experience adventure. Again, no blame or shame, just possibilities. And I wasn't attached to it has to be possibility number one, possibility number two. There was a big part of me that wanted possibility number two, not going to lie. But I was being open. So then I transitioned into the resolution and said something like, so how can you and I work together to resolve this? Like all I want to feel and experience is I want to feel connection with you. I want to laugh. I want to have fun. And this traveling stuff, it's a lot more stressful than I originally thought it would be. So how can we work together to create a solution where we can have fun, we can laugh, and we can grow our businesses together and still experience a sense of adventure? And then I closed my mouth and I sat quietly in the pocket with my wife to see what she had to say in a state, right, internally, from a state of just curiosity, presence. And she then also admitted that she too was tired of packing and moving, and she felt like a bit more of like routines would be really good for her. So we chose to come back to Dallas, grab a luxury condo that backed right up into a beautiful nature preserve within walking distance to this wonderful co-working space and also one of her favorite places, Whole Foods. And this, my friend, is CPR in action. Now, the old me would have stuffed all of this down because I didn't want to be an asshole, right? The old me didn't have this framework, CPR, that I could use to speak my truth powerfully and directly and lead with unconditional love. And eventually what would have happened is I would have snapped and just said something like, Sarah, why the fuck are we traveling? It's fucking miserable. Something has to change now, right? That's how I used to lead because I didn't have CPR. And then if I did that, then an argument would have broken out and the mental sparring would ensue because I would have been blaming and shaming and she would have felt attacked, right? And by the way, she would have every reason to feel attacked if I spoke in that manner. So I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way, right? I've learned this firsthand. CPR is super powerful when you deploy it from a state of true unconditional love and unattachment. And this, my friend, is the key to resolving conflict. See, if my wife would have said, well, I don't like either of those options, I would have said, okay, cool. Well, what do you suggest, right? I would have said, I want to connect with you. I want to laugh with you. I want to have fun with you. I want to travel with you. I also want routines. I want to meditate. I want to hit the gym. I want to have a nanny, right? How can we work together to create this? And I would have sat in the pocket trying to co-create what I wanted to experience with her. And we would have found a win-win. And I would have stayed in that state of curiosity and holding to what I wanted because that was what was a fuck yes for me. Because anything less than that would have been me pulling punches. Now, another thing that makes CPR really work is setting clear agreements. And most people do not set clear agreements. Instead, they carry around bullshit expectations, believing people should read their minds. I'm here to tell you expectations are a sure way to ensure that you always create conflict and you never get to a resolution. Expectations are a form of failure and drama waiting to happen. So I'm here to tell you, stop that nonsense immediately. Set clear agreements and understand that agreements can always be shifted and changed. As long as you take Jesus' advice in Matthew 18, verse 15, and go straight to your brother or sister the moment the agreement that you made isn't serving you. See, the bullshit belief people carry around with this type of thinking is they're like, well, if I do that, if I go back to them, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think that I'm not reliable? Are they going to think that I'm flaky? I mean, I can't handle that. I got to keep going, right? But who cares what people think of you? Because can you really ever control what they think of you? Think of that for a second. Can you truly control what they think of you? No, you can't. The only thing that matters is what you think of yourself, and if an agreement that you made isn't serving you, then go straight to your brother or sister and resolve it. You know, I had a client out in Australia who had made a deal doing like done-for-you real estate flips for clients. And at the time, he was doing like the whole service for like $5,000 or something like that. He'd do like half up front and then half after the property sold. And then once he ran his numbers, he saw that the price that he was selling this at, he was making like $7 an hour or something after he paid operations and all this stuff, right? And this client that he had, well, of course, they wanted to continue doing business with him because they were making money. And like, who wouldn't? I mean, it was like the deal of the century for the client. And so my client asked me on a call one day, he's like, hey, dude, like, what do I do? You know, I'm realizing that this original agreement I had, you know, I have people wanting to continue doing more and more and more deals with me, but I just, it's not sustainable to me. I'm making $7 an hour. So I told him to honor the agreement that he made, right, on that one deal, and then deliver on that deal, and then call the client and tell him the truth. I told him, say, hey, you know, tell him that you ran the numbers and tell him that it's not working for you on future deals. And tell him your new price and see if he wants to continue playing with you at that price. And at first, my client was terrified of being that vulnerable. He's like, oh, no, what are they going to think about me? And I was like, dude, come on now. I know the meek inherit the earth, meaning those of us who are willing to be vulnerable have the most influence. I've seen this time and time and time again. So I really encouraged him to get vulnerable and to use the CPR framework with this on his client. So he mustered up the courage to do so, and the client was actually happy to do future deals with him at the higher price point. I'm telling you, my friend, there is so much to learn from the teachings and the principles that Jesus shared with us in the Bible. They're like so good, especially this one about conflict. So let me wrap this episode up. Conflict is one of the greatest gifts of the human experience. So stop running from it and learn to embrace it. Not an embrace it in this rah-rah warrior going into battle to bully people to conform to your point of view bullshit. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about learning to find the middle ground, where you learn how to resolve conflict from a place of power and not force, where you learn to use a framework like CPR and a handful of other conflict resolution techniques that I teach my clients. And I'm here to tell you, if you don't commit to learning how to deal with conflict powerfully, there are two disempowering things that's going to play out for you. Either A, you will burn out and despise every single person that you work with and in your family, or B, you're going to be the asshole. You're going to burn through people and never get to experience a deep connection with other humans. I know if you take what I'm throwing at you today, you'll have more clients who actually respect you. You'll attract clients who are easier to work with you. Your stress levels in business will be reduced. You'll experience more connection with those you love. And overall, you're just going to feel more happy and confident. So my invitation to you is this. Where in your life are you pulling punches in your communication? And what impact is it having on your growth, both in your personal life and your business life? How much more simple would life become if you're willing to stand in the fire of conflict and learn how to deal with it consciously? Like where you used a tool like CPR to be proactive in handling conflict rather than constantly living in a reactive state believing you have something to prove or something to defend. Jesus shared the simple strategy in Matthew 18 verses 15 through 17 for handling conflict. And if you're currently pulling punches, I'm here to encourage you, to tell you that it's time to hit people with all you got. And I promise you that they can handle it. And they've probably been silently waiting for you to rise up. So remember, my friend, I'm on Facebook posting all sorts of great stuff that will help you better deal with conflict and unlock that next level of freedom and purpose and success in your own life. So make sure you check that out at facebook.com/AJAmyx. And again, that's facebook.com/AJAMYX. Simply shoot me over a friend request. And that's all I got for this episode. Thanks for tuning in to another Sunday sermon edition of the Anthony John Mix podcast. I hope you have an amazing day or a night or afternoon, depending on what time it is that you're listening to the show. Until next time, my friend, I'm out. Peace.
Well, that's all I've got for this episode of the Anthony John Mix podcast, but we have plenty more to help you become unstoppable in life and business. So head on over to ajamyx.com for exclusive resources, information, and tools to help you break through to a new level of freedom, purpose, and success. I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Bye for now.